Thank you. Thank you so much. Can you hear me, everyone? Yes, perfect. All right, so thank you for being here. I know it's this stupid time of the day, after lunch. Hope that you all get coffee. My name is Núria, and for the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to talk about web accessibility, but in particular about how designers and developers can create more accessible products just by following very simple usability guidelines, right? So focusing on the beginning of the project rather than at the end. So I can tell you straight away that there won't be a single line of code in my presentation, but instead there's going to be a lot of examples and resources and screenshots, and you can find everything under this link. You can download the presentation, and all the resources are there linked, so feel free to go ahead with that. So a bit of intro about myself. I'm originally from Barcelona. Probably you heard it in the news lately about this city. But I'm currently living in Munich, where I work at Holido. Holido is a search engine for vacation rentals, and you will see later on what we are doing. So I'm going to give you some examples of what we do there. And I'm also organizer of the Munich Accessibility Meetup, which is a group that gathers people who are interested on the topic, and we do some events across the year. So if you are from Munich or someone happens to be there, please check the group and maybe you can join us the next event. But on top of this, I'm a designer. And first, I would like to know about you. How many of you are designers here in this room? OK. Developers? OK, that's combine both? Someone who, there you go. All right, so I'm sure that some of you relate a little bit to this thing here. So designers, typically, we have a lot in our plates. So some of us, do some research. We talk to users. We do some interviews. We also do user testing, interaction. We do all the visual part of it. Some of us even do prototyping. Some brave people even do coding as well. And the list goes so on and so on. So photography, content. There is many areas that we touch on a regular basis. So where does accessibility fit on all of this, right? When we have so many areas to touch, why designers keep ignoring a little bit this topic and pushing it down into priorities? So the thing is, after talking about the topic with many, many designers, I realized that anytime someone mentions accessibility to a designer, this is what happened. We really collapse. We are frightened about the word. So accessibility really scares us, right? In our heads, it's technical assessments, guidelines, testing, audits. I don't know. It's really, really overwhelming. I mean, we like to draw things, right? Do things pretty. So this feels quite technical. So what do you do when you don't know about the topic? You start to research about it, right? So whenever you start to look about accessibility, you start to meet pages like this one here, right? This is the WCA guidelines, the official ones. This is a quick reference about it. And as you can see, there is a lot of text, a lot of information, resources, links. And then you keep looking around. You have the section 504, also a very important website out there with a lot of information and a lot of text again. And it's quite dense. And this is my favorite one. This is the accessibility page from Adobe. And as you can see, it's not really appealing and also violates some foundational accessibility areas, which is low contrast, very small text, and huge block of text. So these pages here, don't get me wrong, they contain a lot of really good information, but they're not really appealing. So designers, we have a bit of troubles on that. So that's what I'm here today. I want to break this misconception about accessibility. I don't want you to see it as a technical or ugly or difficult to do, but instead, take it as a creative challenge. So I want designers to take this chance to go far beyond their skills and their resources and look in another way, in another perspective about this topic. Just for some of you might not know, I'm sorry, I'm covering, but accessibility can be shortened by ally. So this is someone, I don't know who invented, sorry, this down here, but between the A and between the Y, there is 11 characters, so some very clever person shortened, and you will see this quite a lot. This references accessibility. So what we're going to do today, we're going to look at what is accessibility, why designers should care about accessibility. And finally, how do we do it? Here, we're going to get very practical, and we're going to look at some resources. So in a very broad sense, accessibility is the practice of making a website usable by as many people as possible. And by website here, I mean any digital content, so anything that can be interact online. And typically, it's thought that this is for persons with disabilities. But at the end of the day, it's proof that when you are designing with accessibility in mind, at the end, you are improving the experience for many, many other users. And I'm going to give a very good example. How many of you have watched Peaky Blinders? All right, not a lot. So, for the ones who saw the show, which, by the way, is really, really good, how many of you actually needed subtitles to understand the wording? All right, at least I did. I mean, it's a really strong accent. These guys are from Birmingham, and it's sometimes super difficult to understand what they are saying. So I need to turn them on, and actually a lot of people in the US needs as well, because it is very, very strong accent. So subtitles or closed captions is a great, great example of why accessibility can be improving the experiences of many, many people. So this was originally created for people who are deaf or have hearing impairments, but instead it's used also by someone who is learning a new language or when the dialogue is very difficult to understand. Also, when there is like very noisy environment around you and you want to just be quiet, you might turn on the subtitles as well, right? Or perhaps because you're trying just to be quiet and you don't want to annoy people all around you. And also, they are very useful for people with cognitive impairments. So for example, someone who has autism or deficit of attention can have some problems focusing on the image, and they rely on the subtitles to support the content. So with this, I want to illustrate this point. So when we design for accessibility, at the end, everyone benefits. Now, let's gonna look why accessibility is important, so why you should, guys, think about it. Here, I could give you a huge list of reasons why it's really, really important. I could tell you that maybe your business is exposed to a lawsuit, right? So if someone with disability cannot access your product, they might sue you. Or I could tell you simply that you're just missing a really opportunity of market, because like these persons will also consume your product, and maybe you are missing them. Or I could just tell you that it's the right thing to do, that it's the ethical case. But for me, as a designer, as a user experience designer, it all narrows down into one thing, which is empathy, right? So we are people who are designing and developing products for other persons around there. We should be able to get out of our own bubble of design and technicality and put ourselves in other people's shoes, right? We should think about what are their context, their situation, their needs. And this, for me, this is the foundation of our work. This should be the tool that we use the most when working. And it's essential that we understand this because right now we do everything online. So 20 years ago, internet was for like few people, right? But now everyone does very basic tasks online. We do shopping, we do groceries, we do banking, right? This is really important. We communicate online with our people, we learn, we play. So these are main activities that when we are preventing certain group to access them, we are preventing to basic needs, right? So for most people like us here in this room, technology makes things easier, but for people with disabilities, technology makes things possible. So for someone who is blind, for example, and might need a screen reader is basically a software that scans a website and reads it out loud. So the person who cannot see it at least can hear it. This technology exists, but the problem is like websites are not prepared for it. Some websites break against this technology, right? So this is our task and our responsibility to make it right from the first place. And from my opinion, accessibility actually starts in design. So most of the time, we think that our developers, the only people who can influence on accessibility. But in fact, designers can even help earlier in the process. If we plan, if we design products that are accessible in the first place, then we're going to avoid a lot of rush and a lot of fixing at the very end. So I just put here areas that I believe designers can influence with their powers, right? So if we look at a website, designers can influence on the typography, we can change the layout and the structure, we can change the interaction of things, and we can change colors. It's impossible to cover all the areas of accessibility in one talk of 30 minutes, but I just try to put like the concepts that I believe are more foundational, and you can definitely replicate it in your daily job. So I'm going to start with what I consider is the most core value, like the biggest core of a website, which is the hierarchy and the structure. When users arrive to your website, they have a goal in mind. And in order to achieve this goal, they're going to go through different tasks. This is the example that I want to show you today. Last week, I wanted to know how many people with disabilities are registered in Spain. So I went to the Instituto Nacional de Estadística, which is the official website, to get this information. And this is what I was presented with. I mean, I don't know even where to start. It's just really chaotic. There's no order, there's no structure, right? How do I even initiate my task in here? So my first thought was just going through this left side, because I thought that that was the navigation. Well, no, that's just filters. Filters to change the content in here. The navigation are those blocks with colors there on the top, but there. Over there, that's the main navigation. Here's where you open the sections and then you decide where to go next. And you might think, well, you could use a search, right? Can you find out where the search is? It's right there at the top bottom. It's just really, really, it was chaotic. And this is an official website, so I needed to get that information. Right now, I couldn't find it yet, so I had to go to other places. Instead, here you can find the same website, but for the UK government. And the thing changed completely. So they have the main navigation really outstanding, and right underneath, you can have the search. So you can choose how to start your task, right, your goal. But they give you in a better, more easy way. And then you have like different sections underneath. But it's a matter of priorities. So some tips here. Make sure that the key information can be quickly allocated on the first scan of the page, and place items in order of level of importance. If it's difficult for us sometimes to find things on the website, think about someone who has cognitive impairment, or like some dyslexia, or something that really impedes, like makes it more difficult to understand what's going on there. You need more time. So try to make it as easy as possible for users to start their goal. Another important thing regarding the structure, keyboard navigation. So we need to understand that not everyone uses mouses because they cannot or because they don't want to. So the same way that I'm saying that we should build things in a logical order, we should always allow users to navigate through websites wherever they want. So if you want to use a keyboard, you should be able to go through all the important parts with your keyboard. And for that, I'm just going to show here, it's not playing. This is a little, okay. Sorry about that. Okay, it's not playing, but basically here it's showing Airbnb using the tab system through the different pages, and it's really showing the different areas. It's working here, actually. Oh, sorry. It's not working in my screen. Okay, so as you can see, it's going through the different tabs, and it's showing where are you in all the moment. So anything that the users can see by hovering with the mouse should be like focused with the keyboard. And also it's very important that we indicate where the focus is. So using this ring focus is really, really essential for people to understand how are they navigating. Another item that are really important as well are links. Links are these items that allows you to move across the websites. And it's really important that when you look on a website and you scan, you can quickly find them, because then you can go to your next level. So as you can see here, designers, we try to simplify or like create more minimalist styles most of the time. So I found a pattern in fashion blogs. Basically, they always look like magazines. They don't show you where the links are. They try to mimic with the text. Right now, if you look here, can you guess what are the links? So basically, are these things between the brackets. These are links. But at the same time, they use it for a reference, photos by Ross. It looks the same style, but these are links, these are not. this is very difficult for me to understand if I can click or not. It's not really obvious. And I'm not saying that you should do like these guys here and make it all blue, classic link style. You don't have to go down road neither. It's really good that you find a balance. So I think that this is a very good example of a balance. So this is in Vision Block. And what they do is use the very classical convention, which is like underline links. And when you hover over, it gets like a little animation. Or down there, like they have like some color changes. So you can still do some stylings which are nice and beautiful and aesthetically pleasant, but at the same time make sure that people understand straight away that these are links, for example. So tips here. Links should be recognizable without having to point on them, and use common conventions like underlying and distinct colors. You will help a lot people to understand where they go next. Talking about text, I think that when we talk about accessibility, the first thing that comes to our mind is like color contrast. This is something that we hear quite often, and yet is the thing that we fail the most. So most of the websites, and this is like a study done recently, it shows that they are still not meeting color contrast. And that's very important because 90% of the information in the web is written language. So I'm just going to show you here 3 examples. One is from Google, Pixelbuds, Squarespace, and like this blog that I found, Wine and Plastic. It's quite known, but I had no idea. You can see a pattern here, like very gray fonts, quite minimalistic style, right? Like the contrast is not really obvious. Imagine someone who has low vision, right? So that they lost the sight across the years. Or maybe someone who lost their glasses. Or perhaps you are outside and there's a very bright day and you're looking at your screen, right? Maybe this is what you see. It's very difficult to identify what are the important texts. Maybe the ones that are big enough or dark enough can outstand a little bit. But as you can see, the gray areas, it's really mild. We should make sure that the contrast it has a minimum so the people can read, right, the text, especially when there are like areas that are important. Sorry, let's start from here. And to illustrate that, I'm going to show you a little experiment that we did at Holido. So I just mentioned earlier that Holido is a search engine for holiday rentals. So basically, if you're going to go to Mallorca next year, because probably you're going to go to Mallorca next year, you can use this website. You can put your destination, your dates, and then we find offers across different providers like Booking.com, Airbnb, etc. Which means that we have a lot of offers when you do a search. There's like a lot of results. So we think that it's very important that in order to narrow down your searches, you use the filters. So as you can see here on the top, we used to have these filters here, but we had the assumption that that was not really well seen by the users. So we just did a simple change, which was increasing a little bit the font size, make it darker, and make a border all around. So we wanted to make it more outstanding for the users. This experiment, which we do quite often in order to check whether the variation is better, turned up that it had some conversion increase for our site. So there was like 7% more filter interactions with this variation compared to the base one. And this, because probably users could narrow down their searches, did lead down to more booking conversion, 3% more booking conversion. That might not seem a lot, but I mean, the change was minimum. Like development and design here was literally like very little, and that has some impact. Imagine if you do this in a larger scale, in a bigger scale, that can help a lot. So this was one of the things that we recently tested. Things that you can use for the color contrast. Right now, most of the browsers, they already have incorporated some check inspectors. So you can use the inspector tool on your browser and you can check whether your text has a proper color contrast. If not, there are tons of websites where you can put the font color of your text and your background, and they will tell you whether it's accessible or not. Or you can use some plugins as well just to check these things. And no worries that you can find this later on the resources. Another area that is quite important, which is the icons, so trying to be predictable. The burger menu, this has a lot of forums, like everyone is discussing this topic. The burger menu here in the New York Times. This might seem obvious for me and for you here in this room because we are trained to understand that, but might not be really understood by everyone around. So not everyone understands what these three little lines are. Especially since the designers, we invented many other menus, I don't know how, but we managed to create the kebab menu as well, the meatballs, the doner, the bento, the breadsticks. These are used. I didn't invent these ones, for real. The people are using these ones out there, especially in apps. How can we ask users to remember all of these and then to identify it as a main navigation? So not for everyone these are common. What I would suggest in these cases is always try to bring text with this icon, because you will make this content easily understandable. So here in the Washington Post, instead, what they do is using the burger menu, but also they add a little label that says sections, right? So this is clear. This is with one scan eye, I can quickly go there and open and find what I need for. At the end, it's trying to make the users accomplish their goal faster. Another point as well, it was to use familiar icons. So try to connect the concepts. Basically, don't use shapes that might be super weird. Try always go to the safe option. Another topic that is very important for designers, and we manage in a daily basis quite often, it's color. Color, it's everywhere, and it's part of our work. And the way that we perceive color might be different as well from certain people. One of the tips that I think that is very important and we tend to forget is relying on color alone. And this is very important because right now 4% of the population have some sort of color blindness. Just to explain you briefly what colorblind is, basically it's a deficiency that affects directly to the perception of the light. So someone might have a different perception of the green light, and that's called deuteranopia. And this is the first bar in there. Someone who has a deficit of perception in the red light, it's protanopia. And the same goes for tritanopia, which is the blue. These three are the most common ones, but there are more than these ones. There are way more. But the thing is, for designers, it's very important that we acknowledge this, because if we depend only on color, we might not allow certain users to understand the same way that we do. And I'm going to give you an example here of an event ticket in the UK. So this is a website that you can buy tickets for your show or for the theater, right? So you select the dates, you select the show, and then you are asked to select a seat. And each seat is attached to a prize. So as you can see here, for each prize, it has different color model. But what would happen with someone who has eutanopia, which is one of the most common ones? This is what they would see. Basically, the prices between 62, 52, 32, and 20, they all look very similar. Is there someone here who doesn't see any difference between these two slides? No, OK. I was curious, sorry. OK, so as you can see here, everything looks quite similar. So how are you going to find the difference between, the prices? Relying on color might be very, very tricky. And unfortunately, this still happens a lot in many, many areas. So e-commerces are the best example. They just put here the shades of colors of your clothes and figure out, OK, just choose whatever you want, right? Or, for example, Skyscanner, they use it for the price in their calendars. But then again, what would happen if you are colorblind? Do you remember where was the red or the green? No, right? So they all look similar. So I would always suggest do not depend only on color to explain very, very important information. This is a plugin that you can add on your laptop, and you can check the two variations, whether if someone has some color blindness. I will list that later. What can you do instead? Always support color with a label or some text telling what that color is, for example, or any material that you need to show. For example, between the blue, the petrol, and the turquoise, very little difference, to be honest. Who kind of difference, right? What you could do also is integrate some patterns inside the colors. Trello had a really good example. So for every different color, they did a different pattern here. So if someone is colorblind or just cannot differ between colors, at least you can differ in between patterns. or always supported with like an icon, for example, and some text. So forms are really, really important. What would happen if you just highlight the border without any message or any icon? People might not perceive that red, right? So always provide as much information as possible. Another very important point, sorry that I'm going very fast, but like this is really difficult to cover so many things. But we need to understand that some people might have difficulties as well, whether using a phone or using a mouse because of hand tremors or like Parkinson disease or arthritis. So there's like many lists. I'm just going to show you a little clip of someone with Parkinson disease using a phone. So as you can see, it's quite difficult to aim target points in here, right? Especially when there are like small points. This cannot only apply with people who has a disability, but imagine yourself on the train or on the bus using your phone, and it's just bumpy, right? And you don't have really good holding of your phone. For that, it's very important that we give enough space to the users to click, a minimum area. So there are like many guidelines around there, like people trying to find out which is the best size, but more or less it's around 44 pixels, or what it's more or less 10 millimeters of like fingers, let's say. And also it's important that we give some space between the target points, so we don't click something which is by mistake, right? So we can really have conscious clicking on there. And the primary action should be easy to reach, whether in the screen, in the big screen, or a small phone. We should be able, with like one hand at least, clicking things fast or in a good way. For that, I also have an example from Holido as well. In this case, was for the map in the mobile version. So one of the important things when you are looking for accommodation is looking for the location of where this house or this apartment is. So we have some pins. Each pin, it's one house or one offer. And we had the feeling that it was quite small, even for us, sometimes to click. So we decided just to make them bigger. This is honestly, like implementation-wise, it was 1 minute, 2 minutes, I don't know, like very little. We just made this slightly bigger. It turns out that for the users who opened the map, right, who used this functionality, there was like 20% more interaction with these points just because we make them bigger and we make them more clear, right? It seems quite obvious, but it has a huge effect for not only people with disabilities, but someone who might have like, big thumbs, basically. And this led as well to 13 booking conversion. And again, for people who use the map, this was not like overall conversion of the website. And lastly, I want to give a point on animation, motion, and clutter. This is a huge topic, and you can make a presentation only for this, but I just want to make a little note. Have you ever tried to read an article in Forbes? This is what happens, especially if you don't use ad blocker. You have all these ads, and then this video here, really over the text. This is really annoying. And then it pops up, and it pops here again. And then all these things all around. This is really annoying for me, especially, and for a lot of people. But imagine for someone who has like cognitive impairments as well, and might even be distressed on this situation, right? It's like this, you are interfering with the main task, which was reading an information in an article. That should be really common. It's important, this video, I don't know, but probably can be placed somewhere else, not on top of the context. And now, careful, because on the next slide, I'm going to play some videos with like very harsh and flashy animations. So I just wanted to point it out. Be careful with like heavy animations and like high stuff. I'm going to give you a couple of clips that I found in Twitter. Can you see that? This is from Apple, and this is from a Blank Festival, which is a design festival. This, maybe in this big screen for you, is not really annoying. But if you're reading this with your phone and you're like scrolling through Twitter, and then you find this all of a sudden, that might be very annoying for us, but can cause a seizure to someone who has really a vestibular disorder, like, for example, someone with schizophrenia, or like someone who is really have like motion sickness. We need to be very careful with these techniques. I mean, I know that we want to represent a lot brands and really create identities, but be careful, the users out there. Not all of them know that you can turn off animations in your phone. So there are like now techniques that you can do it. But let's think through if we really need all these techniques. So please don't do that, like at all. These are areas that designers can check. There are many, many more, and there are like a lot of areas that I'm not covering here. This is very basic stuff, but we all know this. Probably we have it inside. It's just like we need to remind ourselves, like when I'm creating things, let's step out from this little bubble and think about the persons out there. By applying these design principles, we are not only improving the experience with someone with impairments, but to everyone. This is the main message here today. Create for one, but extend for the many. Just a little recap, so I don't know how I'm doing with the time. Accessibility benefits everyone. So as you can see, these practices will actually improve the experience from many, many users. Empathy. Empathy is the key. All these tools, these resources, the plugins, like these checkers, basically what they are giving us is some exercise on like how to look at our designs in a different perspective. Let's use them and let's try to extend this empathy to any work that we do. And start with core like design principles. We don't have to learn everything all at once. Accessibility is a huge, complex topic. I'm just starting to learn, to be honest. But there are like some core design principles, usability guidelines that are basic, they are foundational. Let's start with this one. Let's do baby steps, and from here, keep learning and keep building things, and especially create communication between developers and designers to do like better work. Just for you guys, I would like to invite you to Accessibility Club Summit that's going to happen in Berlin next month. So if you are interested on the topic, you want to learn more, or you want to meet people who are like really good advocates, you can visit this place. The price is really, really accessible as well. There are like workshops for 25 euros. It's like really nice, and you can learn a lot on the topic by professionals that are working there as well. That's it for all. Thank you so much for listening. Questions, right?
Yeah.
Don't grill me, please.
Just raise your hand if you have questions. I see you all thinking.
It was a lot to take, I know.
Yeah. But if you don't have any questions, or maybe they arise later, then you're still here, right?
Yes, I will be here all the afternoon. Yeah.
And
come back me anytime. There's like a couple of them.
So the question that I have is about color contrast, which you already spoke about.
Yeah.
And I noticed as a designer that having a color contrast that is in that follows the guidelines is sometimes very hard, especially if you're trying to use a secondary color. So if you're trying to have something stand a bit down and you want to give it a gray color, and in order for it to be accessible, you need to give it, I don't know, I think 65% gray or 60% gray in order for it to hit the accessibility guidelines. But then at that point, it becomes so dark already, because it has such a high contrast, that sometimes it's hard to differentiate between the black text and the secondary text, which is very dark gray.
Yeah.
So in a way, what this does is it de-emphasizes the hierarchy, and so I feel like the interface becomes less accessible for people who don't need very high contrast, because a bit of hierarchy gets lost. That's very important. And so I wonder if there are any strategies for dealing with that that you would like to follow.
It's really difficult to find this balance always. I think there are other techniques apart from the color contrast. Instead of like reducing the contrast, you can also look for different weights of the font, for example, like use a lightweight font, slightly smaller text, but always trying perhaps not to use both at the same time, not using gray text and very light fonts and very small fonts. I think it's about to find a good structure that hierarchy makes sense, that is readable enough at least. Generally, I don't think that people that the site users are hurt by like dark texts. If everything is dark and there's a lot of text, for sure, but you can always play with like other areas, like, yeah, basically this, and just trying to find colors that might be slightly different as well, like other grays from other areas, but always trying to find this balance. It's not easy, and it sucks, especially for designers, when we are in love of our super smooth, nice design, but then it's about to find these constraints and turn them into something tangible. Yeah. I have to run a little bit.
Yeah. I'm getting there.
Hi.
Hello.
I know that this is a designer talk, but could you tell us more about this WCGA 2.1 standard?
Yeah.
Because like in a lot of specification, when a client wants to have an accessible website, she write like it needs to be with this standard. Like so, how to approach that? Because it have like really strict rules. How to prepare your website.
Yeah, so these guidelines that I show there are created by a gathering of professionals who are qualified as accessibility professionals, and they decided certain guidelines, and every now and then they revise these guidelines. Basically, this is the commentation. It's agreed upon, I don't know, the group there, and you can follow, so there are like many areas. There's the design part, there's development part, there's testing. It's really, really huge. When your client, you say that your client wants to meet those, and they ask you to meet them. The best you can do is either train yourself to these references or ask someone who can help on the community, like a professional or a consultant. There are like Slack groups worldwide that you can access there. And if there is anything in particular, yeah. Yeah, so basically there are like Slack groups that you can access, and then you can ask professionals that they are like certificate and they contribute into these guidelines, and they can give you information in a specific topic if this is what you are required to. Obviously, the guidelines are massive, are huge, and they are like being agreed upon and they are revised constantly. There's not something set in stone. You can train yourself, but it's like big.
Okay, thank you. Do you consult your designs with some people with impairment? Like when you design something, like do you like call your friend like, hey, could you check this design if it's readable for you?
What you just mentioned it's a perfect example. If you can have someone around you that you can reach, relative, friends, this is always great. If not, there is also like platforms like usertesting.com or Optimizely. They're like different tools that they include people who can you contact, and you can send a link on your website and you can test with them. I think in Germany there are also like organizations of like people who work as that, as a testers, as a QA testers, and then you can reach them as well, for example. But yes, I would always aim to check people around you, check the community, and if you can test your designs with people with real impairments, you would learn a lot also, yes.
Okay, last question about mobile, because those are all like web examples, but Android and iPhone have their own like system-built functions, and how to approach like designing for accessibility on mobile with also all this help from Apple and Android, yeah.
Very good question. And they have their own guidelines as well, so you can access them. And even Android and iOS also, they include some accessibility functionalities inside the phone. So you can go into your menu and check, there's like in both of them, this accessibility section, and then you display your like different things that you can do with your phones. You can change to high contrast, you can turn on voiceover to read all the content, and you can actually learn by playing around with your phone as well into these guidelines. But also they have their own set of documentation as well towards that topic, each individual statement, like for both for Android and iOS as well, and many more. Very welcome.